Welcome, everybody. Great to have you with us tonight. Welcome to Get Started Building Your Business with Lean Startup, brought to you by Penn State SBDC and Harrisburg LaunchBox, powered by Penn State, as part of Penn State's Global Entrepreneurship Week. And as we go through the presentation tonight, feel free to throw your comments and your questions in the chat box. I'll review those questions at pauses in the presentation and at the end of the presentation too. So let's get started. Hi, I'm Annie Hughes. I'm the director of the Harrisburg LaunchBox, powered by Penn State. I'm also a management consultant with the SBDC. Also do I-Corps coaching through the National Science Foundation. And prior to being in higher ed and working with entrepreneurs, I was a manager of disruptive innovation at the Hershey Company, and also a director of sales and marketing at a small business in my home state of Iowa, which is called Ecolips Incorporated. So you've probably heard of Lean Startup, some of you, but it's kind of not really clear what it is and how to use it and why you should care about it, right? You just know that people talk about it, right? So let's learn a little bit about what Lean Startup is and how you might use it tonight. Lean Startup is a methodology for developing new businesses and products, and it's popularized by Eric Ries and Steve Blank. The point of Lean Startup is to quickly discover if an idea can be made into a viable business and to identify that viable business model. And the point is to do it all in a way that shortens product development time and de-risks the business building process. Lean Startup process helps an entrepreneur to spend less time and probably less money building their product by enabling them to test and get customer data throughout the product development process. So not just at the end, but throughout the process. The entrepreneur minimizes the amount of time building the product in order to test early versions with customers and to use that customer feedback to inform further product development and then iterate their product design and test again. And this whole process significantly minimizes risk for the entrepreneur. A hallmark of the Lean Startup process is the concept of an MVP, the minimum viable product. The most popular definition of the MVP is the smallest thing that you can build that delivers customer value that you can test with real customers. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that is and what it means a little later. But the point of the MVP is to test it. It's to test it with users, test it with customers. And you want to get the most data and the most helpful data from the customer tests for you to use in designing your product. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about MVP in a little bit. First, let's look at some alternatives for startup model designs, okay? The first I'll call the 20th century startup design. And this is pretty familiar to most of us. It starts with the founder having a startup vision, a product vision, right? And then just deciding to go ahead and build that product, fire up the line, fire up the factory, and build 1 million of them, okay? And then we'll worry about finding customers, and we'll just get a good sales team. The sales team will fix that problem later. Okay, this is a very common model, still used today, unfortunately. It does not have a high incidence of success. In fact, is a very dangerous model to go on. So let's look at a different model that will de-risk your process a bit. This one is a customer-driven design. It starts with understanding the customer needs. From there, identifying a product solution based on your understanding of what the customer is looking for, and building that MVP so that you can test it with customers and using that data to iterate and pivot and circle this little process a few times until you have some degree of confidence that what you're building is actually going to solve a customer problem. You might be wondering, oh gosh, do I really need to spend all this time and effort to understand customers? I mean, I already know my customers. I fit my customer type. I've identified a problem to solve. Isn't that enough? It's a good question. Let me show you a statistic and then we'll discuss it. I'm going to give you a minute to absorb this information. Okay, 97% of documented business ideas fail. 75% of venture capitalist-backed ideas fail. Business ideas, especially early stage, are very, very likely to be wrong, either a little or a lot. Top 10 reasons startups fail. It's not because the product doesn't work. It's because the founders don't understand the customer problem, and so they don't build the right product to fit the problem. When that happens, it's called the product market fit problem. And by far, it's the #1 reason that startups fail. So let's talk about how we can help you avoid falling into this trap. First, let's talk about an example of a product for market fit problem. A really great example that's pretty familiar to most of us is the Segway. So think about the last time, if anyone's ridden one, the last time you rode one, under what circumstances did you ride a Segway? Well, you probably were either doing some kind of tourist activity, or maybe you were a mall cop, I don't know. Believe it or not, the Segway was not originally intended to be relegated simply to mall cops and tourism. It was actually designed for general population use. So let's find out what happened. The Segway in 2001 raised over $100 million for development. It was expected to be a huge success, projected sales of over 10,000 units per week. It was expected to revolutionize transportation, particularly in dense urban cores. The Segway had a lot of hype behind it. We had venture capitalists saying it's going to be more important than the internet. It's going to rack up $1 billion in sales faster than any company in history. You have Steve Jobs saying it'll be bigger than the PC. What actually happened? At the end of 2 years, only 6,000 units were sold, not 10,000 per week. Colossal failure. What went wrong? In a nutshell, and perhaps oversimplifying, there was a lack of clarity about the customer and the customer's problem or need. And so the product that was built didn't fit the market need. It didn't inspire demand in customers. It had a product market fit problem, which resulted in low demand, which resulted in very low sales. If we were to really dig into what went wrong here, we would start with identifying what the assumptions were. What were the assumptions made that, if true, would have made Segway a roaring success? And kind of conversely, if any of these were proven false, it would have spelled complete failure for the Segway model. There are a whole bunch of assumptions here: that urban customers are interested, that there's a need for another urban transportation form to the alternatives, a lot of which are free or low cost, that the customer is actually dissatisfied with the other options, that they articulate it as a problem, that they don't have this other way of getting around town, that the customer finds a solution better enough to switch from what he or she is already doing, that the customer is willing to pay something for the solution, that the customer is willing to pay $3,000 to $5,000 for the solution, that the user can operate the product safely and conveniently, that the product doesn't have any other problems that prohibit adoption or use. Okay. A number of these assumptions were not adequately tested and were proven false. For example, the Segway didn't solve the transportation issue well enough to justify the $3,000 to $5,000 price tag. And some of the inherent issues with owning one of these, storing, maintaining a large device in a limited space that's available in large cities. There were regulatory issues. Many cities did not allow Segways to be ridden on sidewalks, and riders were understandably unwilling to ride these on roads. So some of the key assumptions around adoption, or rather barriers to adoption, were incorrect. Another adoption issue was that it was underestimated that the aesthetics, the impression of the aesthetic of the Segway, some of these riders who were looking at this thought, this makes me feel stupid. I feel like I look stupid on the Segway. It's got a large and wide profile, and the way the rider stands on it and operates the device, for some of these potential customers, that was a huge turnoff. So, it's easy for an entrepreneur to be so drunk on the wonders and positives. So the real question, and probably why you're here tonight, is how can we improve our efforts to achieve product market fit, to achieve a greater likelihood of success? Let's take a look at the customer development model for startups. And this is linked to the lean startup process. Lean startup is actually based on a startup methodology. This startup methodology actually developed by Steve Blank, and this is called customer development. Now, this model is the gold standard model used for launching startups. It's likely the model you're going to run into in any startup accelerator program these days, including the Idea TestLab program that we'll talk about in a little bit for those of you who are curious about that. It is called customer development because it's customer driven and not product driven. So, get it? It's not product development, it's customer development. So yes, it starts with seeking an understanding of the customer and then continues to seek out information from the customer to develop the product and to identify the business model. There are 4 parts to this model. Number 1 is customer discovery. Customer discovery answers the question, have I identified a real problem? It tests the hypothesized customer problem that you want to solve, right? Make sure it exists, and it exists in a way where it doesn't just apply to 5 people. Then you have customer validation, step 2. That answers the question, does my solution, my proposed solution, adequately address the customer problem? So at this stage, you've identified a product solution or a value proposition, and now you need to test the value of that proposition with real customers. All right, and that indicates whether you have a fighting chance at product market fit. So you're testing whether your product solution is desirable. In order to test that, you need something to test with customers, and you're not ready to build a full product. You're not even fully sure what the product is yet. You just know what the value is that it needs to deliver. So you're building an MVP to test this model. So when you test that MVP, you're going to be likely to pivot based on your learnings and continue that customer discovery. So you're going to travel this little iterative cycle as you search for product market fit and as you search for a viable business model. Okay, when you're able to do that, when you found your viable business model, what you think is your viable business model, and you've tested your value proposition, you can move on to customer creation. That's step 3, and that gets in the execution portion of this model. So you're actually executing your business. So for customer creation, you are creating and executing your business plan. You're acquiring customers, you are selling to customers, you are scaling, and you are continuing, though, to collect in-market customer feedback and data to continue to iterate your business model as needed. And with the final stage, company building, at this point, you've validated your business model. You have demonstrated demand. You have an answer to that question of what are we as a startup? What are we doing? What are we providing for our customers? What do we mean to our customers? You know, you have some answers. You've tested those questions, and you have some answers for those questions. So you're transitioning from a startup to a business at this point. So the most important and the most perilous parts of the process are actually at the beginning, the search stage, the foundational strategic stages, right? So you're searching for that business model. And business model, what I mean by that is really how you define and how you deliver value to a customer. Okay, a lot to digest there, I know. So now let's get even more complicated. Let's talk about the MVP. And as a reminder, the MVP is the smallest thing that you can build that delivers customer value that you can test with real customers. The idea is that if you can test a representation of your value proposition, so not, again, doesn't have to be the full product, doesn't have to be the product, but rather the value. If you can test the value to the customer, you will get better information with which to actually design your product. So whether it's a lo-fi version of your product or even a product concept, letting real customers experience your MVP provides that critical information for product development. So in the example here, the customer problem, let's say the customer problem in a case like this is the customer needs to get to the store quickly with less effort than the current way they're doing it, which is walking. Okay, very simple. So if you, as the inventor, wanted to design a faster, less effortful transportation solution, and you had, let's say, an automobile design in mind as a hypothetical solution, let's say the auto doesn't exist yet. If you are wanting to test your value proposition, would you be testing one auto part at a time with the customer? Would you be testing one wheel and one chassis at a time? No. Does testing a single wheel with a customer provide you any feedback on their interests or experience with your proposed solution? No, it's not only is a single wheel not functional, it provides no experience of value for the customer. Okay. So here's another way to think of it. When you test your MVP, you're testing iterations of value with the customer, so not product features. So looking at the bottom series instead, okay, here's how you would build and test an MVP. First, you might test faster transportation than walking, and that might be tested through providing the customer with a simple set of wheels. Then you might test faster transportation with improved control through a simple steering system attached to those wheels. Then you're starting to see the customer react a little bit, but still not fully satisfied, right? You got that straight mouth going on. Something's happening, but not quite, okay? So you might test an even faster and less effortful transportation method in number 3 there through a more complex system. Okay, still not there. So then you might provide a significant increase in power through motorization. And then you're starting to get somewhere with that customer. They're like, yeah, I think this is starting to solve my problem. Okay, so that's number 4. And then you might find that that you're testing a fast, no effort transportation system that's also easy to operate, safe, and also fun to operate. Okay, and then you can see you've delighted your customer, right? So you've identified a value proposition that solves the problem and really gets your customer interested in adopting your solution. Okay, so through building and testing this MVP, you are testing the benefits of your product solution, the value, rather than the product. There will be opportunity, plenty of opportunity and plenty of need to test the actual product too, for efficacy, for safety, but that's actually a little bit down the road from where we are here, no pun intended, down the road. So first you need to know what you're building. This process helps you know what to build, what product you're building that meets the customer needs before you go and fully design it and then test it. Okay, so just to sum up into a little bit of overkill perhaps, the MVP process helps the entrepreneur know what to build using real customer feedback of the customer value, and that is the solution to the customer problem or need. All right. So the point of all of this, the point of Lean Startup, the point of this process is to allow you to identify and develop your business model, the way you define and deliver value to your customer in a way that minimizes your risk. So to identify and develop your business model, you need a tool to organize all the elements of the business plan. And the tool that we actually recommend, the kind of gold standard for startups, is called the Business Model Canvas. The Business Model Canvas is kind of the startup's business plan outline. It allows that entrepreneur to enter hypotheses for each of these areas. We'll go over the areas in a second. And then iterate and update them as they test and learn. So this tool is really good for customer development methodology because it's designed to be a living and iterative document. The business model canvas is divided into 3 sections that build on each other. So the first section is the upper right. And that answers the question, is your solution desirable? Will people want it? And can they adopt it? It's really the first order of business, because if the answer is no to that question, it's really not worth your time to do any of the other sections, right? So first order of business, is it desirable? Second then would be the upper left section, feasibility. So that's really asking, will you have the resources, abilities, can you build the value for the customer? And once you've identified the answers to those questions, you can move to the bottom section where it says viable. Viable is really around sustainability. Can you make a sustainable business around it? And can you make money? Okay. But really the foundation and the first order of business is that first section, because it's not worth your time to work on the other sections if you're not certain there'll be demand for your product. So now let's go briefly over the parts of the business model canvas, just starting with the section referring to desirability. So the first section that you actually start with are your customer segments, and you're answering the questions of who are your most important customers that you intend to target. What are their archetypes? So you'd actually maybe create a persona to describe those customers. And what job are they trying to get done? So what are they trying to accomplish during which they're encountering a problem that you intend to solve with your product solution? Then you actually kind of scoot to the middle section there, value proposition. And that answers the question, what customer problems are you helping to solve? What customer needs are you satisfying with your solution? Okay. Next, you're going to address the 2 sections in between customers and value proposition. The first is customer relationships. That answers the question, how will you get, keep, and grow your customers? There are 3 different strategies there. And then channels. Channels are, understanding how you're going to reach your customer, both for fulfillment of providing that value to the customer, and also marketing to help them learn about your product solution. Okay. Let's look at feasibility next. So the first section in feasibility to look at is key activities. Key activities mean that what's actually happening inside the building. I'll say inside the building in air quotes, because some of you are operating businesses that don't require its own building. But what's actually happening inside the business to produce that value for the customer? Is it manufacturing? Is it software development? Is it something else? Resources refer to what is required in order to supply those key activities in order to create that value. So what are the inputs to the process to produce the value? And partners are kind of, look at that as a resource. It might be suppliers, but who's required to be partnered with you in order to produce the value? And lastly, viability. The first section, cost structure, pretty straightforward. What are your most important costs inherent to your business model? Identifying even the categories of costs first is really helpful, and then you go on and do some costing research. Identifying too the fixed and variable costs is an important part of this process. And then the revenue model. So how will you make money? What's the actual revenue model? Which would be, how does that transaction take place? Is it a transaction? Is it some kind of freemium model? Is it a subscription? There's lots of different revenue models you can choose from. And then what are the pricing tactics? So that's actually, even more specific. Okay. So as you're working through this business model canvas, and by the way, this is free online. I forgot to mention that. It is on the Strategizer website, and you spell Strategizer with a Y. Okay, and you can download this, but if you were to Google business model canvas, I'm certain you would find at least one copy of this online. But so as you work through this, though, the idea is to understand that your inputs are hypotheses, are guesses, and they need to be tested. So how do we turn those guesses into facts? Well, we identify them as assumptions, and we come up with ways to test those assumptions. So the million-dollar question, I think, is how do we test our assumptions? Okay, I'm going to let you absorb this little comic cartoon thing. Okay, the point of this is that you must talk to customers. You must do research. You must do customer discovery, which is talking to those customers to learn from their own experience, learn about their experience of the problem that you're aiming to solve. In order to do that, you have to, quote, get out of the building, okay? These days, you can probably get on a Zoom call, but the idea is you can't just sit in your room in a vacuum and just imagine your customers and come to any usable insights. You actually need to talk to people who fit your target market. You need to talk to them because you need to, A, figure out if they actually have the problem you think they have, and B, learn about their experience of the problem. You need to hear it from their own mouths. You need their experience, not your thinking, your imagining of their experience. And you need that in order to design a solution for them that they will actually adopt. You have to understand that they are the ones who decide whether they adopt your solution, not you, right? So that's why it's so critical to hear it from their mouths so that you understand what could I create that they would actually want. And when you put those hypotheses on your business model canvas and you test them by talking to customers, your goal is to fail fast. That's not something you usually hear, okay? But what that means is your job is to figure out where you're wrong. Where are you wrong in your hypotheses? You're wrong many places. I can tell you that. I don't even know you. I don't know what your business idea is yet. And I can tell you with certainty right now, sitting here, that you are wrong somewhere in there, okay? Because that's always the case. Wrong a little, wrong a lot, but your goal is to figure out quickly where you are wrong. It is not to confirm your own darn bias. You're looking for points of failure before you set your business afloat to try to avoid this from happening. So when we ask, why do we need to talk to our customers? The answer is to try to avoid building the wrong product. So when you don't validate the existence of the customer problem, if you don't fully understand the customer experience of the problem, you run the risk of building the wrong product, a product that doesn't solve their problem. in a way that they will adopt. So I'm showing the image of the Segway because there was a very successful innovation that came along later, much later actually, that solved the same problem the Segway aimed to solve, but it did it in a way that users would and could adopt. E-scooters, there's lots of versions of them out there. But based on their own demonstrated product market fit, and we can measure that by the fact that people bought them, that they were successful, we can consider an e-scooter to be the right, or I'll say righter, solution to the transportation problem, whereas the Segway missed the mark. All right, so here is the portion of the presentation where we talk about our particular program through the Harrisburg LaunchBox to help early stage entrepreneurs through the customer discovery process and to how to implement those lean startup principles. So to help an entrepreneur conduct the customer discovery research and to help them test their assumptions, we offer a program called Idea TestLab. It's an accelerator program offered by Harrisburg LaunchBox, and it is a virtual program. Idea TestLab is a pre-accelerator program for early stage business ideas. And in the program, a small cohort of startups focus on customer discovery, the first stage of that, the 4-stage customer development process. And through the course of 6 weeks and up to 40 customer interviews, they're identifying who their target customers are. They're validating the customer problem that they're trying to solve. And they're gathering intelligence to identify a value proposition that will solve the customer problem in a way that the customer will adopt. So the program is 6 weeks. It consists of 5 2-hour virtual class sessions, one-on-one coaching sessions in between, and a final pitch competition at the end. And the upcoming program are Tuesday evenings from February 16th through March 23rd. The program takes you through the customer discovery process and actually ends at the point of customer validation. So participants end with having drafted their value proposition, having created a plan to create the MVP and to test it, okay? What they've not done at this point will be to have designed their product or completed the other 2 steps of the 4-stage methodology here. So it's really trying to get you through the hardest and murkiest part of this process. It walks you through a process of identifying and testing your business assumptions. That's very similar to kind of a scientific methodology for testing hypotheses. And so that's what we're doing. We're guiding entrepreneurs through this process. The process can be confusing, so that's why it helps to have a little bit of structure and support around it. And as I mentioned, we support these entrepreneurs and we motivate them as they go do their customer discovery, which means that they're doing 40 interviews over 6 weeks. The last thing I'll say is it is a competitive program. It's a small cohort that's accepted. So if you're interested in participating in Idea TestLab, you do need to apply, and you need to apply by January 17th of 2021. And the final pitch competition, our teams are competing for seed funding up to $2,500 in seed funding. And there's a total of $5,000 in seed funding we give away each program. In the 2 years we've been doing these Idea TestLabs at the Harrisburg LaunchBox, we've had 20 startups graduate, and we've had these teams win $15,000 in seed funding. And you can find out more at our website, harrisburg.launchbox.psu.edu. So as we conclude our presentation, and before we jump into some questions, I want to leave you with a little inspiration from one of the greatest failures of all time, Thomas Edison, who once famously said, I haven't failed, I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. So failing fast is how you advance in building your business idea. It's not an indicator that something's wrong. It's actually an indicator that you're doing it right. So let's all fail fast. Let's boldly use those customer development steps and model to find our product market fit and to find that business model that will be successful. So with that, I will open it up for questions. And I'm going to open my chat box, but we can also have you all just speak up if we can. I don't know if our moderators can allow people to unmute. I do see one question here. When there are times like COVID, which we hope are temporary. How does one decide to pivot or just weather the storm? That's a really good question. And you're actually looking to see what your customers are doing. What I would suggest you do is see how customers are reacting to your business, given the change in landscape, the sudden change in conditions. If by pivot you mean completely change your business model, I mean, you'll definitely want to kind of think deeply about that and map out all the implications of that. But we've seen a number of businesses, for example, identify new product lines that are in greater demand now due to COVID, like protective gear, signage, things like that. They're reacting to the different needs in the marketplace. So it may be that that you've identified an opportunity that's come up as a result of this sudden change in circumstances. But the way to find that out is to talk to customers. You can do competitive research to see, how other businesses are kind of making changes and pivoting and seeing what's working for them. But then also to check in with your own customers, do those interviews and see what type of additional needs they might have that you can fulfill. Okay, any other questions? Let's see here. One's coming in the chat box. Let me just see if this is a question. Okay, got it. So the question is this a process that is a one and done that just a startup should do and then just kind of coast forever off in one direction, or is this something that should be done frequently? What's the best practice for a business is to continue collecting data from customers and continue to adapt and iterate over time. It doesn't mean that you'll necessarily make radical changes to your business, but rather, when it comes to your product portfolio, for example, you might have a group of products that you have out there, and that you might notice that over time, new competition comes into the market and is challenging those products, the product portfolio. You might need to then double down in gathering data from your customers to learn how can I serve their problem better and compete more effectively. With the COVID question, circumstances might change. People might have less money in the pocket, due to a recession, or they might have new needs that pop up. Creating ways to continuously collect data from your customers, whether you are surveying them, picking up the phone and interviewing them, also keeping an eye on your competition because they're doing the same thing, or they should be, right? You're always then collecting data about your customers, and then you can make decisions about how to adapt. And you should always be trying to answer the question, how can we better fulfill a customer need better than our competition does? So to answer the question then, it is a continuous process that you always want to be in the game. Okay, any other questions? This question says, does every type of business startup need to do this, or is it only for new business concepts without a defined model? I'm going to say that every type of business should be collecting data from customers, and if they're undergoing a product development process, to utilize these principles for your product development process, absolutely. But this is especially for businesses without a defined model or with an unknown model. It's very difficult to navigate those waters without some kind of structure like this. So you definitely want, if you're looking to start up a business and you're not sure who your customer is, you're not 100% sure, what the value proposition is, and you certainly don't know what your product is yet. This process is for you. All right. So make sure you use it. But even if you're a business that's up and running, even if you have a traditional business model, this process is used for product development, and it's used to kind of continuously answer the question, am I adequately solving the customer problem? There's one question here. Are there any prerequisites for the Harrisburg LaunchBox Idea TestLab? There aren't any prerequisites in that you don't have to do anything before Idea TestLab or to apply. By the way, Idea TestLab is not restricted to those who are affiliated with Penn State. You do not have to be affiliated with Penn State to partake in anything related to the Harrisburg LaunchBox. But it is for a certain type of business. We do prioritize scalable businesses. So scalable oftentimes means, technology or manufacturing. And technology is very loosely defined these days. I mean, many people are creating software and apps and so forth. That's considered technology. By scalable, I mean that something can grow, but it can also grow in profitability as it grows in scale. That's what scalable is. So we prioritize those businesses. However, if you think this is the right process for you, I would encourage you to apply. And again, you do not need to do anything prior to Idea TestLab. It is also designed specifically for early stage entrepreneurs. So if you're too far along, that might preclude you from participating. And by too far along, if you've launched a market, if you have a dozen customers already, if you have a model that's kind of rolling, you probably don't need us. Or if you're trying to create a traditional business model where there aren't a lot of unknowns, you might not need it either. I mean, you could still follow this process, but you might not need the Idea TestLab program. Because it is very intense. It could even be overkill for what you're trying to do. So I would encourage you, if you have any interest in this program, definitely go online. You can read about it on our website. You can email us through the website and ask, if you have any questions about whether it's for you or not. Definitely check it out. Let's see here. One more question. I see that you're in Harrisburg. Are there other launch boxes with similar programs available to entrepreneurs across the state? Yes, there are. So there are a network, I want to say it's like 23 launch boxes now across the Commonwealth. They are associated with other Penn State campuses. And they do have similar programs. They're usually at different times, and they have sometimes slightly different flavors of programs or different kind of takes on them. Like, for example, our Idea TestLab program at Harrisburg is 6 weeks, and it offers an elevator pitch competition at the end. Some other campuses offer Idea TestLab programs that are slightly longer, slightly shorter, slightly different, have the same kind of broad scale objectives, but they kind of deliver it a little bit differently. I should mention the Harrisburg LaunchBox Idea TestLab that's coming up is virtual, and it is open to any Pennsylvania-based entrepreneur, early stage entrepreneur. So you can be anywhere in Pennsylvania and apply to our program. Okay, any other questions tonight? I tried to put some frequently asked questions about Idea TestLab on our website. So please do, visit our website. Here, I'm gonna get you that. There we go. harrisburg.launchbox.psu.edu. Visit that website. There's a tab for Idea TestLab. Read that web page. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us through the website. And I just want to see if there are any other questions. These are good questions. Thank you very much. Okay. We might be at the end then. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. It's great to see you. It's great to be with you. Love hanging out with entrepreneurs, and we're here to support you. So we have lots of other services available through the Harrisburg LaunchBox. Go on our website. In addition to startup accelerator programs, we offer one-on-one coaching for free one-on-one coaching. You can get access to free legal support for entrepreneurs through the Penn State Law Legal Clinics. So make sure to visit our website and learn about everything we offer at the LaunchBox. Also, make sure to go on the Global Entrepreneurship website and check out the events that are happening this week. There are other great events coming up. Participate in as much of it as you can. This is a great opportunity to learn a lot in just a week's time. And we have a lot of great speakers and guests coming through the GEW event page. So make sure you find out what's going on there. All right. Well, thank you again for joining me tonight. Again, my name is Andy Hughes with the Harrisburg LaunchBox and the Penn State SBDC. Wonderful to see you guys. Hope to see some of you apply for Idea TestLab. Yeah, I'll hopefully see you at some of our upcoming events, and have a great night, everybody. Thanks so much.
innovations. It's really in the hearts and the minds of the individuals in each of these countries. There's a way that now we think entrepreneurs might be the force for change in their countries for things beyond just economic change, that they can actually make the world a better place. The field of entrepreneurship is no longer something of narrow commercial significance. It's something of more cultural consequence. It's something that represents the possibility of human endeavor for the benefit of all. The globalization of startup communities actually gives the world a much better chance at solving some of the intractable challenges of the decades past. So in a sense, we see more citizens trying their hand at helping the world innovate its way out of its challenges. The world needs more entrepreneurs. It's a question of inspiring more people to recognize that it's more important to the future of their societies than they